SEI under 7 cents is an absolute steal. In today's video, I'm going to talk about why I'm still personally bullish on this project, regardless of the terrible price action we've seen in the past couple of months. I'll also talk about whether or not I believe the bottom is in, and what we can reasonably expect out of this project in the next 6 to 12 months. But before I get into all of that, guys, this is Royalty Crypto, and if you like this type of content, please do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. But alright guys, let's go ahead and take a look at the chart. As you can see, SEI has fallen from its all-time high that we hit back in September of 2025 at 37 cents down to about 6.5 cents where we currently sit. And guys, I completely understand why so many people have been very discouraged by this price action. I mean, especially if you were accumulating up here at above 30 cents, that is a pretty horrendous drop to say the very least. But at the end of the day, guys, this is just how the altcoin market is. And if you can't handle these types of moves, then you should not be investing into one of the most risky asset classes in the entire world. But at the same time, guys, just because the altcoin market has been beaten down so much in the past couple of months, I still think that there are some amazing opportunities in some of these strong projects, SEI being one of them. If you guys were around back in 2022, it really did seem like the entire altcoin market and really just crypto in general was completely dead, and the majority of retail traders were saying that they were never coming back and that they were just going to cut their losses and move on with their life. Now, in my opinion, guys, it really does feel very similar right now, and in many ways it is actually worse in terms of overall fear in the market. But back in 2022, I was going against the grain and accumulating strong altcoins, and fast forward to late 2024 and early 2025, and a lot of those coins I was accumulating did a 5 to 10x, and I do believe that that is very possible for SEI. When you take a look at the current market cap of this project, we are sitting at just over $400 million. SEI is undoubtedly one of the best layer 1 blockchains in the entire crypto space in terms of overall technology, and I believe that it has a very strong narrative, but as it stands, we are just not in the right environment for it to be doing well. But once that does inevitably flip, I believe that SEI has a real possibility of getting somewhere between a $5 to $10 billion market cap. So if you are accumulating down here at today's levels, you could potentially 10 to 20x your money if you do end up taking profits at those potential levels. Now guys, of course, we could continue to drop in the short term. It is impossible to predict an exact bottom, especially with this Iran-US situation going on right now, but I do believe that we are close. And if we do continue to drop, I believe deploying a dollar cost average strategy is your best bet. Now, of course, that is not financial advice, that is just my opinion, but that is what I always do whenever we see this much fear in the market, and in the long run, it almost always pays off, especially if you are buying into strong altcoins like SEI. So why am I still bullish on this project? Well guys, although everybody thinks that SEI is dead and will never return to its all-time highs, they are continuing to build and strengthen their overall project. As you can see here, they are currently working on their SIP3 Giga upgrade, which is scheduled to be deployed at the end of this month. And basically what this upgrade does is they are turning SEI into an EVM only chain, and they are abandoning its previous dual layer setup with Cosmos. Now, the reason that they're doing this is because they are trying to make their chain significantly more efficient, and in doing so, they are targeting a capability of having over 200,000 transactions per second with a sub 400 millisecond finality. Now guys, that would undoubtedly put SEI amongst the best layer 1s in the entire space, and in doing so, I believe this will attract a lot of developers to actually start building on top of the SEI blockchain, and of course, if that does happen, that is just overall bullish for the project. Now, another thing that I did like to see is the fact that Coinbase is supporting this migration. Now, in the past, we've seen a lot of coins try to make a move like this, and then Coinbase decides that they are no longer going to support the project. One of the ones that comes to mind for me was Gala back in 2023, when they made a pretty significant upgrade, and Coinbase decided that they would no longer list the coin after that upgrade. So the fact that Coinbase has announced that it will be helping facilitate this migration is definitely a bullish thing, because we need exchanges like Coinbase to continue to list SEI in order for it to have the potential to reach a $5 to $10 billion market cap. Now, the last thing I wanted to touch on in terms of SEI news is the fact that they have actually launched a strategic collaboration with a company called AIX Crypto. And in doing so, it is integrating its high-performance blockchain infrastructure with AI, robotics, and IoT. I believe this is also very bullish for the overall narrative for this project because AI has basically taken over financial markets in the past couple of years. So if people start to associate AI with the SEI blockchain, I do believe that it will attract a lot of new investors and help drive up the overall potential for this project. And I understand that it can be very frustrating that SEI is doing all of these bullish things behind the scene right now, but the project is continuing to drop. But guys, I have explained in a lot of my recent videos that that is to be expected right now. We are in very high fear environments, and as long as it remains this way, I don't expect us to have any news-driven pumps in any of these projects, and if we do see a news-driven pump, you just can't expect it to be sustainable. But at the end of the day, guys, this fear will subside at some point, and once it does, and once the crypto fear and greed index returns to at least neutral or potentially even greed, that is when you can start to see some very significant pumps for SEI. And I do believe that there is a real potential for this to happen towards the middle portion of this year. My reasoning for that is because, of course, we do have the midterms coming up in the United States, which I believe will be an incentive for President Trump to hopefully stop some of these wars that we have been partaking in and shift his focus to the overall economy. Because, of course, it is in his best interest for the most amount of Republicans to win in the midterms so that he can keep as much power as possible. Now, I'm not trying to get into politics, but I do expect that to increase the overall likelihood that the geopolitical environment will improve, which of course is bullish for stocks and crypto. And then the other thing is the fact that we do have a new Fed chair coming into office in May of this year. Now, I do believe a lot of bearish people are overlooking just how important this will be for the overall macro economy, but I think that it is going to be absolutely massive. Now, right now, a lot of people are very concerned about the price of oil skyrocketing and how that will likely lead to inflation and the US economy collapsing. But at the end of the day, guys, I think that this is just short-term noise. And I do believe that once this new Fed chair is in office, although we will likely see a short-term spike in inflation, I think that he will overlook that because he does understand that this is just short-term and still focus on cutting the federal funds rate. And whenever we do cut the federal funds rate, it is good for risk on assets like crypto because more people have more liquidity to invest. So don't listen to this short-term noise. In my opinion, this will clear up sooner than most people expect, and then that is when we can hopefully start to push back up for crypto. But guys, it is very possible that we could continue to see a lot of volatility in the short term because this week alone we have a lot of macro data that is going to be released. The most important that I believe people should be focusing on is the CPI inflation data being released on Wednesday and the PCE inflation data being released on Friday. Now, last week we did have some pretty horrendous employment data being released that did scare the market quite a bit. So I do believe that this inflation data is incredibly important in the short term. So yeah, we all need to be keeping our fingers crossed that inflation is lower than expected, because if it ends up being hotter than expected, we can definitely expect to see more red in the overall financial markets. But alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. At the end of the day, I think it's best just to buy into people's fear and be patient. That is the strategy that's made me a lot of money in the past, and I expect it to do the same this go around as soon as we start to get some greed return to these markets. But alright everybody, I hope you have a fantastic Sunday, and I'll be talking to you tomorrow. Peace.